Hello everybody, my name is Cogland639. Welcome back to another video. Today in this one I'll be doing my top 5 meta decks for the October 2022 format post Darkwing Blast. YCS Minneapolis has just wrapped up, and so we have a somewhat good idea of what the meta looks like. So I just want to in this video cover my meta cards, like meta staples and stuff like that, meta engines, my honorable mentions, and then my top 5 decks for the format, even though it's looking to look like in a week or so it's going to change once again once the Yugioh cards come out. But we're not going to worry about that right now, so without further ado, let's get straight into the video. And before we can get into the video, let's cover the top 32 breakdown of YCS Minneapolis here. So first, we're starting off with 53% representation from tier limit, which is very not surprising. A lot of people were expecting this to be the top deck going into this YCS, and it did show up a lot. 17 tops out of the 32, very much so. Sprite being the second one here with 29% of the representation with 9 tops in the top 32. Again, those are the two top decks, and they take up 82% of your representation in top 32. Again, not surprising. A lot of people were expecting this going into it. Flunderies takes 9% of the representation with 3 tops in the top 32 here. And then for the rest of the decks, it's only 1 top, equaling 3% of the representation here. Exo Sister, again, this might be a little surprising. You would expect something with 50% representation, tier limit. Exo Sister being a deck that can really counter that deck really hard, only getting 1 top. So it just shows you that tier limit players are making sure they can play around the Exo Sisters and stuff like that. Dragon Link makes it in here, and this is not surprising as well because they get the new Bestial stuff, which is very, very nice for them to start searching dragons and stuff like that. And then the Thunder Dragons also did get a top. This is with the Bestial stuff that just came out in Darkwing Blast. Very surprising to see that, but that is your top 32 breakdown here. So without further ado, let's get into my meta staple card. Starting off with our meta staple cards, we have Droplet and Dark Ruler no more. Again, they basically do the same thing. I think Dark Ruler is seeing more play than Droplet is right now, but absolutely insane cards just for going second, just having those board breakers in a format that really do want to be playing board breakers instead of something like hand traps. Very much, these are the top 2 cards in there. Droplet is a little less played because you do have to waste some of your hand advantage for that to happen. This could change when a Shizu comes out because they like being sent from hand to graveyard because they can trigger their effects that way and stuff like that. But right now, Dark Ruler is absolutely amazing because you can negate the entire field without having to waste any advantage on your part. But Droplet also is very nice at quick play speed. You can also still kill them if you can, because Dark Ruler prevents damage to your opponent for the turn you activate that card, while Droplet lets you still be able to do damage. So again, they have their pros and cons, but they basically do the same thing. I prefer Droplet more than Dark Ruler, but a lot of people are preferring Dark Ruler more than Droplet. Again, they're mostly doing the same thing, but again, it just depends on what the deck you're playing and for you to decide on what card you want to play. You could be playing both as well. That's not a decision that's not that crazy right now. Both cards are very insane, so playing both would be nice as well. So that's the first meta staple cards I have. Next thing up here is Triple Tactic Talents. Now this is a very, very good card, which thankfully is getting a reprint next week. Thank fucking God. But very, very good card, especially in this meta where your opponent will be activating monsters in the main phase, so this card will most likely always be live as well as a board breaker, and also going first if you're versing something like hand traps or the Bestial stuff, or if you tier element Hot Venus exists as well. So triple tech going first and going second is always very, very good. This is a card you want to keep out on because it has now only 2 banned cards since they did take off Change of Heart. But draw 2 cards, always very nice. Take control of one of your opponent's monsters is also very good as well. But looking at that opponent's hand, especially if you're going first to get that hand knowledge, is also very nice as well. Again, very, very good card that's getting a reprint next week, so thank God. Hopefully that'll be very cheap for players to access, but very, very good card you probably want to consider. Maybe if you want to throw it in the main deck, it's very good, but side deck, a lot of people are playing in the side deck as well. Very, very good card to have on your hand. Next thing up here is Evenly Matched. Now, this card is very good right now because not that many decks are ending on Omnium Gates. But the only problem with this right now is you can't really play it in like a top really good deck. Something like Tier Limit can't really play this card because, one, they're playing Haffinas, which will get a monster on field, which would turn off Evenly Match. The new Bestial stuff would turn this off as well, but still a very, very powerful card, and people are playing around it as well. The Sprite players are playing something like Ibly to get a monster on your field, so you can't activate Evenly Match or something like that. And then, people also could be side decking like a Terra Element Crime or something like that. So again, people are prepared to go against Evenly Match, and the Evenly Match isn't that great, especially with Darkwing Blast, but it's still something you do have to consider, especially since it's getting reprinted next week with Triple Tactics as well. So a card you do have to look out for, but, a lot of people are playing around it, and could be not that good as well if you're playing like the Bestials or Terra Element Haffinas and stuff like that. Next thing up on the Meta Staple cards is actually a new card from Darkwing Blast. Fenrir, very, very good card. Basically, people are calling it the next Pinkertops because it's a very good card. If you control no monsters, you can just special summon this card and then search one of its archetype cards. I think it's Castria. I'm going to call it Castria. So basically, you just play like 3 Fenrir in a deck. Special Fenrir, search another Fenrir because it does not prevent you from doing that. It's a interruption as well. When it declares an attack or your opponent activates a monster effect, you target one card on the field, banish it face down. Very, very good. Not only for going first, going second as well is very good. Just to get this card, get a search, you can discard the card you search as well for discard fodder for other plays. But again, Fenrir becoming a really popular card in the metagame right now, and it's a very expensive ultra rare as well, $60. Most, like, the second most expensive card in Darkwing Blast, and that's surprising that it's actually an ultra rare instead of being a secret rare as well. So that is it for my Meta Staple cards. Now let's get into my Meta Engine cards. Starting off our Meta Engines cards, here is Yugioh, a new archetype that just got released in Darkwing Blast. Now, this card is seeing a lot of play, not only in something like Dragon decks that can really take advantage of this. Branded players are also playing this as well because they have a monster that can activate a continuous spell or trap from the deck, so that's very nice as well. But a lot of people are just using it as hand trap fodder because it does hit the top decks in Sprite and Tier Limit because it has a quick effect speed, banishing a light or dark from either player's graveyard. Now, your opponent has to control a monster for it to be a quick effect, but that's not really that hard for that to happen. So they're basically the new DD Crow type monsters in the game. They can special summon themselves, and usually they have the effects. Magnema is the most popular of the engine right now. It can be search just a dragon in the end phase, which goes with a lot of engines. If you're just playing just the hand trap version, you can just search the guy on the right here, Druid Worm, which can, when it leaves the field, it can target a monster your opponent controls and destroys it. But again, a lot of Bestial stuff that's being played not only just as a hand trap, but being played in Dragon League because it can search any dragon from the deck. Also be playing in Branded because one of the Bestials can activate a continuous spell trap from the deck. Very popular engine and not going to go anywhere anytime soon. It's still a lot of play in the YCS. I'm not going to be surprised if it sees more play after that as well. Next thing up here on our Meta Engine cards is the Runic card. Now, a lot of people might give me shit for this. They'll be more like, this is more of a deck than it is an engine. Now, I'm putting in the engine because really Sprite is what gives it a really, really good deck, and you really need the Sprite. If you just play like the pure Runic stuff, you really can't do anything with that. With the Sprite cards, however, you do get a lot more stuff going for you. So I consider it more just an engine because some tier players are playing the Runic stuff as well. Not in the Minneapolis, but the previous YCS that happened in Germany. I forget, it's Utrecht, I think what it was. There was a Runic tier element player that was doing very, very well. So it is more of an engine, in my opinion, than it is a deck, because the pure deck doesn't really do anything. You really need to splash it with something else. So I consider it more of an engine than it really is. Now, it is a powerful engine, don't get me wrong. Just being able to get this field spell and then activate continuous spell traps from the hand, preventing things like Harpy's Feather Duster from happening to you and stuff like that. Very, very good engine for Sprite, and it can be used in tier as well, like I said. Very, very good card. Tip, being able to search. This card, the Runic Fountain, is very, very broken as well, being able to draw up to 3 cards as well. Very, very good engine. So those are my 2 engines. Now let's get into my honorable mentions for the list. Starting off with our honorable mentions here is Branded Despia. Now, this is a very, very good deck that used to be tier 1 back in the summer, but not really anymore. Still a very powerful deck you do have to look out for. Now, I was tempted not to put this in the honorable mention slot. I was more tempted to put it as an engine because Branded as an engine is more, what it is right now. It's more of an engine used in Outledge, can be used in tier limit as Branded tier limit, and also just be used in the Despia decks as well, but I decided just to keep it as the deck instead because I think Branded Despia still has a lot going for it, just isn't as good as it used to be, but they do have some things going for it. They have that new trap called Branded Explosion, which can summon a monster to your opponent's field, basically summoning like Raw Disciples, which prevents your opponent from summoning or tributing over it, which is very, very, very good. The only problem with that is it plays into the bestial stuff, which kind of sucks. But, something the deck does have going for it, so you do have to watch out for it. Can OTK very, very easily, as well. Has access to Guardian Chimera and stuff like that. Has a lot of interruptions. Again, this is a deck that's not the top deck, but again, you do have to worry about it, and people are going to be playing this deck as well. So something you do have to worry about, but in the honorable mentions for me. Next thing up here is Outledge. Now, Outledge is in a weird position right now because you always have to consider it in every single format that Outledge is going to be somewhere. You just don't know where it's going to be, and you always have to prepare for it. It's going to be at locals. It's going to be at regionals. You just have to prepare for it. This is a floodgate deck, and it absolutely is good, but a lot of people are prepared in this metagame, especially now, for Outledge. Sprite really, can really grind with it and stuff like that. It's a very strong deck, but I feel like in this meta specifically, it's just in a weird spot where Outledge isn't that great right now, especially with the bestial stuff coming out. Basically being able to target the Outledge, get rid of it, and they get a body for free as well. It's just a very rough deck to, consider. Again, it's a good deck still, but I just don't think it's the top 5 deck, and always will be good unless something just completely happens in the meta where Outledge is garbage. It will always be decent, but will just never be in the top 5 for me, but something you always do have to prepare for. Next thing up is Sword Soul. Remember when this thing won the U.S. Nationals here? Oh my god, that was insane. But yeah, Sword Soul has kind of fallen off since then, just because Sprite and Tier are just so much better than what Sword Soul is packing right now. Again, you still do have to worry about it, because Mystic Mine, they can play under Mystic Mine and stuff like that. Rivalry, they can main deck that, which screws the top decks right now as well. But again, Sword Soul is just more of a rogue strategy that's barely hanging on to playability right now, which is very surprising because it did not get hit whatsoever, but it's just been power creeped out of the meta. Again, something you do have to worry about, and it does set up some nice boards, but it just isn't as good as it used to be. Again, it did win Nationals back in the summer, but again, that's more because Mystic Mine Rivalry existed, and a lot of people now are packing outs to those cards as well. So again, not that great anymore, but still a deck you still have to worry about if you go to a locals or a regional. And the last thing up here is Mathmech. Again, Mathmech is a very, very good deck with Mathmech Circular coming out in Power of the Elements, but just hasn't been seeing that much tops. I mean, like, regional stuff has been seeing tops. Again, in the YCS, it did not get any tops whatsoever. I think this is still a very, very powerful strategy, being able to use Rivalry in its deck without it harming it at all. Has the OTK strategy with the access code, the trans code. Has a very good play going first with the Super Factorial and playing hand traps and something like Heat Soul as well. But just, again, a deck that's very, very good, but the top decks can, outpower it more than it can, Mathmech can keep up with it. Again, a very powerful deck that will see play, and it will see some tops as well. Just not good enough to make the top 5 for me. Top 6, I would say this is number 6 on my list, but a very powerful deck that just could not make the top 5 for me. Now, that is it for my honorable mentions. Now let's get into the top 5 themselves. Coming in at number 5 is Exo Sisters for me. I have this a little lower than a lot of people might consider this. A lot of people might consider this like the 3rd or 4th best deck in the meta right now, but I have this at number 5 for a couple of reasons. One, yes, it's very, very good against tier limit. If it versus the tier match, it has a very good shot of winning that match. But again, if it versus anything else, if it versus something like Runic Sprite, it will have a hard time doing something like that. If it versus a rogue deck, something like Mathmech or something like Sword Soul, can't really compete with those decks right now. And it also dies to something like Rivalry, which a lot of people are playing for the top decks as well. But this deck is still very, very good. It has the banishes with the trap. It has Martha, which is very, very good for the archetype itself. It can play D-Shifter in its main deck because it doesn't really care about its graveyard. So they just want to keep making sure that your opponent does not play the game. I just don't think if you don't verse the tier matchup, you will have a hard time playing with this deck. Don't get me wrong, it still has a lot of things going for it, even though if it doesn't verse the tier matchup. But I feel like if you verse the tier matchup, you're in a really good position. But if you verse any other deck, I feel like you're just not in a better position than you would against tier would be. So again, I have this at number 5 just for that reason, just because it's good against tier, but against like a lot of other decks, like something like Rogue or even like Sprite, it will have somewhat of a struggle as well. So that is my number 5. Now let's get into number 4. Coming in at number 4 is Fluanderies. Now I hate putting this in the top 5. I really do, but the YCS, they did get a couple tops, and it also, I think, made it to the semifinals. I could be wrong about that. I think it got somewhere in the top 4. But again, very, very powerful deck because a lot of people are not playing hand traps right now, which is very much helping the Fluanderies players because, again, this is a deck that can main deck D-Shifter, again, which will fuck the 2 top decks in the format. It can play degenerate trap cards, something like Rivalry of Warlords, and the Harpy's Featherstorm because it's Harpy's Featherstorm. That card should not exist, but it does exist, which is unfortunate. Again, very, very good deck. A lot of people do hate this deck, and I understand why I hate this deck as well. But like Barrier Statue with the Featherstorm, it gets annoying after a while. But like that's why it is good right now because of all those degenerate shit it can be able to do. It can play Prosperity and Duality just to get more consistency stuff in there as well. It has Time Wind cards in their main deck, which also fucking hurts as well. Fluanderies, again, I hate putting it in the top 5, but it is a number 4 deck for me. Fluanderies will get that number 4 spot. Now let's get into number 3. Coming in at number 3 is Dragon Link for me. Now, I might be just overhyping this just a little bit, but I feel like the Bestial stuff really does give this deck a lot more than what it has before or after the Ruler ban. I feel like this deck is so much better now with the Bestial stuff. Again, being able to play 3 of each of the Bestials, the Magma, the Drugworm, and the Secret Rare, which I don't remember its name right now, but it's the one that can activate the branded spell trap from deck. Those cards are insane for the archetype. It's so good, very, very good for the archetype, especially the Magma being able to just search any dragon. So basically just a Rhoda for your deck for anything, which is very, very insane for this archetype. Now, again, with the Ruler being gone, this is less powerful than what it used to be. And now I might just be overhyping this a little bit. Maybe you want to put Exorcister at number 3 and like Dragon Link in number 5. I would understand that. But I just have a lot of faith in this deck because it never fucking dies. It never does. They always give a dragon support. Just look at the Bisted stuff. And it did get a top in the YCS as well. Very, very, very good deck. I think a lot of people will be on this just because a lot of people do like Dragon Link. So playing the Bisted stuff will just help out as well. Again, your decision if you want to have this high. I might just be overhyping this deck a lot, but I do like Dragon Link at number 3. Now let's get into number 2. Coming in at number 2 is Sprite for me. Now, if I made this list before the Minneapolis YCS, I think I actually might have had this at number 1 just because of what happened in the YCS in Germany, the Utrecht one. Because Sprite is very, very good. It has multiple versions of the deck. You can play the Evil Twin version of the deck. You can just play pure Sprite. You can play Runic Sprite, which is a very, very popular build. And you also could just play Sprite Tearlament as well, which is very, very good. It has a lot of things going for it. The Elf and the new Link Monsters Sprite Sprine is very, very good for the archetype as well, giving it play something like the Nimble, not Beaver, the Nimble Angler, which is very, very good for the archetypes, especially into Beavers from the decking into more plays and stuff like that. Very, very good deck. Absolutely still insane. It was top deck when it first came out and still very much is the top deck right now, especially if you combine it with other decks like Runic and Tyr. Very, very good deck, but just not quite number 1 for me. And coming in at number 1 for me, it's Tearlament. Again, you can switch between one and two. You can have Sprite at number 1 and Tearlament at number 2. No matter what, I feel like you just have to have Sprite and Tearlament at number 1 and 2. There is no other deck that can keep up with what these decks are doing right now. Tearlament, just very insane. Being able to mill your deck for cards that, get you into fusion summons. You can play other cards, something like the aforementioned Nimble Angler, which can get you into level 2s, which can get you into Sprite plays, which is also insane as well. This deck is just very, very good. As you can see from the top 32 list, it covered 53% of the representation. More than half of people that got with Tearlament, and that's with different versions of Tearlament as well. Pure Tearlament, branded Tearlament, and then Sprite Tearlament, and then you can play the runic stuff in there as well. Just a very, very good deck that has a lot of things going for it. Something like the branded in High Spirits is very, very good, especially with the new Virtuous card as well, giving us access to Omni Gates like something like Baron and something like Guardian Chimera going second as well. Just a very insane deck. It actually is insane that number 1 and number 2 can combine together into a deck, which is just very, very insane. Yes, right now, the meta right now is just the top 2 decks, which is Tearlament and Sprite, and then you have the Exo Sisters and Flunders that can main deck D-Shifter, which do fuck both of those decks as well. So this is my number 1 deck, and this might stick at number 1 as well, because next week we're getting the Ishizu monsters, which is just going to be more support for Tearlament as well. So yeah, I hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you did, leave a like and subscribe for more content on the channel. I'll be doing another top 5 once YCS Pasadena passes by, which I will be going to. So hopefully I'll have more in-depth for that metagame as well. And I hope to see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.